Welcome back to my Russian audience. It's been a while. I've missed you guys, and I've been playing up here in Alaska for the summer, and now I'm back to doing some interviews and kind of getting into more work again. So I think last time we were talking about the moon and Dulce, and I think the galactic slave trade. Is that right, Alexander? Is that
I
where we left off?
I think so. Yeah, we
I think
left
so. We
off.
think that's where we left off.
We left off in like 1980 when you said that we didn't even get to Mars, and
Yeah,
and
there we go. So, so
yeah.
let's journey on to Mars. Let's bump up to like 1982.
Okay.
Um, and I want to talk about, let's get into the 20 and back, which I always have trouble talking about this as if it were just 20 years, which is plenty significant like time, but I always feel like it was longer than that. I think because, and maybe I've mentioned this before, I had multiple clones that seem to be sometimes overlapping, and that can give a
Hmm.
sense, I think, of an increased time experience.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, so forwarding, I guess, or we want to say going backwards into 1982 in the fall, September 82 is when I was taken into that longer, much longer experience on predominantly around Mars, but also other locations, which included the Kuiper Belt. We've mentioned that, I
Hmm.
think, in passing.
Yep.
So yeah, so 9 years old, not quite 10, being abducted to Mars. And um, what I remember about that night was it happening in slow motion. My little red house in the woods in New Hampshire. Um, yeah, being kind of sucked out the side of the house. I know that sounds kind of,
Yeah.
weird,
Yeah.
but we are talking about abduction. And
Uh-huh.
then, like, my body kind of just a sense of hovering in the air and kind of unable to move in any way, and like mute, paralyzed, and like kind of a rag doll. And the kitchen light is on. I remember this clearly. The kitchen light is on, and I'm just kind of wishing I could reach my arms back to the house, and I'm knowing it's not going to go well for me. I absolutely feel like this isn't going to go good no matter what happens, and I can't do anything about it. I don't remember necessarily being afraid, but just kind of going out that way. Um, Interestingly, too, my might have mentioned this, I don't know. My brother has very distinctly similar memories of being
Hmm.
taken out, not the side of the house, but the top of the house in a very same manner, which I think is quite telling. I mean, we were having some parallel experiences, and I do believe he was also taken into a 20 and back program. So I think that's relevant to the whole discussion. Anyway, um, and this time period of my life, I want to just share that I am shocked by how little I remember of that era of my life. I would have been going into grade 5, and I have one picture of that year and very few memories. And I don't know if that was just because my being, my human person, and my larger sort of multidimensional person was not yet adjusted to coming back from that experience. I'm not sure, but that's also when things started to go downhill for me. And like every year in school after that, henceforth, the teacher's bringing me aside and saying, "Is everything okay at home?" And I didn't know what to say. I knew things weren't okay for me. And I guess that's a point I'm trying to make. Something substantial happened in that fall of 1982. Um, so at the same time, let's go back to me kind of being sucked out of the house. This is really interesting that I have a parallel memory of being taken, another part of me, a different aspect of me being taken up like a rag doll into a ship that is a favorable ship. This is the Galactic Confederation, or as I call them, the Light Alliance.
Hmm.
And taking me in tandem, like there's a twin abduction, a dark abduction, let's say, and to use polarized terms, a dark and a light abduction happening. And I remember this being a distinctly beautiful experience of my body kind of falling open from the chest, my limbs kind of dangling, and it's sort of that classic beaming up. But it was so, it's like again slow motion, but it was like slow motion liquid love, like embracing me and enveloping me, and like so luminous and so beautiful. It was like, I don't even know, I don't have human language to describe it. I wish I could paint it or capture it in some way, but it was seemed like it went on for a long time, and I was taken up into their ship, that Syrian ship, where my, galactic mate Tyrion has been. And I have spoken before earlier, I think very early with you about, like they were preserving some aspect of my soul experience. So I wouldn't be as completely damaged and devastated by everything that happened. I wouldn't be so broken by it. And that's the significance, I think, of that twin experience. And I'm glad I remember that. It also instills in me that sense of, yeah, this wasn't just random. I mean, it was part of the soul's journey. And you guys who listen to me on this channel know that I talk about that a lot. And it's always kind of anchored in that bigger experience. So I also wondered, it's almost like having it's an interesting thing to talk about this I wondered if it was like, this is what it's like to die. It was so heavenly. And I don't mean like a morbid way, but the way that everything in my consciousness was opening up as I was being taken up into that ship. Like the NDE. And then from there, as I was thinking about, our recording today, I got to thinking about, like how many times I was brought close to death in the programs and how many near-death experiences. I mean, we could go back and talk about Montauk and the silver bullet and, how many, 200 plus times or so in that silver bullet and part of the technology was bringing me closer to death. But I think that and anybody in the audience who's had abduction experiences knows that any contact experience will open up your multidimensional gateway, open you up to an experience of the quantum field that you can't really put away when you come back. So, and I think really dark abduction can do that too. Like right now in this past year, I've really had a lot more what I could call as out-of-body experiences where I wake up in the night and I actually feel my physical body like levitating over the bed, like my feet are pointing up toward the ceiling and my legs are lifting off and the back is starting to come off the bed. I don't know how to explain this. It's not fantastical in any way to me. It's become more ordinary and it feels safe and it doesn't feel so scary as it did. But anyway, what's my point? Why are we going into this? I just feel like any kind of abduction experience as you go through life later is going to open you to more and more of this kind of like supernatural phenomena. That's where I'm getting at there. And that's been the case for me throughout my life since all of that. So let's go into, so where was I taken? Let's go back to the dark abduction and, going in the 20 back. We're going to talk about Dean and twinning for a little bit here, or more than a little bit. Not my easiest topic at all. If you guys have touched the twinning topic in any of your research rabbit holes, you know that it's kind of dark and gruesome in a way, but we need to go into that a little bit because it really lays the framework of what was going on for me and my twin on Mars and how did that become, what was the point of that? What was the method to the madness? How was this solving a problem for the programmers, right? What were they exploring? So we were taken to Great Lakes Naval Training Station north of Chicago. I think officially it's called Naval Station Great Lakes, and it's the largest naval training center in the US. And we were underground. So it's right on a very big lake. Yeah. We were in an underground place there. And I don't actually think we were kept there for all that long. Like to get done what they got done, I don't think took, months or I think maybe a period of weeks. Only. So there I met a little boy named Dean, who was a little red-haired kid, also 9 years old. And I think they had handpicked him. They knew this was going to play out. And we were trauma bonded. I would say twinned psychically, chemically, telepathically, sexually, spiritually, and emotionally. We were bonded so deeply that I think, it's hard to tell in my memories of Dean. I can't tell always whose thought is whose ideas, that's how much we were in the same mind. I think it's exceptionally helpful to the programmers with the building out eventually of the super soldier. So this is where it really begins, north of Chicago. And the purpose being to create a team of two of us, so whose lives very much depend for our survival on each other, as Delta combat slaves. I use the term super soldier because that's what people know. It's not my favorite term. I think it overly glamorizes the situation. So I would say a combat slave. Yeah. And we would later do recon missions on Mars. I remember with Dean, as we aged, we would be doing psychic recon together, and meaning like remote viewing, for example, the mantid labyrinth, or what the mantids were up to. We could look at that from the base and see, using our joint abilities. And when you create a twin bond, you amplify the psychic ability of them together exponentially. Like it's like high octane rocket fuel psi ability
Oh, wow.
is what happens. It's I don't know how to describe that or why it's exactly like that, but it's way more potentized than a single me on my own working psychically, or him alone working psychically. Like that's what I very much see inside of this. And I would love to hear some more on that aspect of the twinning. I haven't researched it too much, but there's definitely, when they were working with, in Auschwitz with the twins, Mengele's experiments in Auschwitz with the twins, was that part of what they were also looking at is the otherworldly aspect of what happens when you twin, or with biological twins. And then how do we create twins out of, two that are not biologically related, and then using that in these programs. So anyway, at this base underground, we were kept in cages as part of the twinning process, let's say the trauma bonding. And the handlers kept us together. They would put us in a cage that was, we'd be naked without food and water and cold, and kept us there in isolation for a while. And then, we would bond. We would be all we had with each other, right? There's an incredible bond going on in that trauma experience. And then they would take us apart, put us back together, take us apart, and keep doing that. Eventually, they would make one of us view the other person being tortured by a handler, and vice versa. And ultimately, we would be made to hurt each other. I mean, that's all part of the programming, which is really, it's really quite sick. Goes without saying. And it's like to hurt the one thing we love breaks a person completely. Breaks a person. Yeah, horribly. Yeah.
And who were the handlers there?
Yeah, I just remember white guys.
Okay.
I don't remember. I don't have a memory. I think there were some women there as well. It's like a lab. We were underground. Part of it is brightly lit. Part of it is in real darkness, in my memory recall. And there's this muffling. There's a muffled quality of sound. And this is kind of gross, but I don't know if they were keeping it kind of soundproofed as well throughout. Kids are going to be yelling and screaming and crying, and it's going to be a scary situation, right? So yeah, so have a breather through that. Remember, this is part of the mission. And two, I would say, let me talk about how this memory came in, because this was so wiped from my mind. I did not have any pieces of this at all. This was back a few years back in the fall. Living in West Texas, in my last location, there was a place I would go to and walk. It was really off grid, really open land with no Wi-Fi, no satellite connection to anything, nothing. And I was walking, and it was a beautiful evening, dusk, and I had this sense of presence behind me. I had been at that moment thinking of the mantid labyrinth on Mars. My mind was just kind of wandering. And I feel like this male presence that I don't know behind me. It feels very, very protective and kind of nice. And this is, by the way, etherically, I feel it, a presence. And I feel him on my left side. I feel him on my right side. I'm just welcoming it because the energy signature is really good. And I see him as a guy in jeans, reddish, sandy blonde hair. And I can see his t-shirt, his shoes, everything's super detailed, but his face is all pixelated. I can't see his face. And I'm like going, what is this about? I feel like it's connected to the programs, but I don't know what. And like I finished my hike. I was out there a long time alone, went back home. That night before bed, he goes, and he's there again with me. And he said, I'm here. You saved my life. And it was really a moving moment. I was like, what's happening, you know? And I think about too, Alexander, like if I had shut this down and been like, I don't know what this guy wants, da 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 da, I never would have gotten these memories back. So it was like he was coming to me in his the form that he's in now. You know, we're the same age now, and introducing himself as at that time, a late 40s man, right? And saying, I'm here, this happened, and you need to know about it. And I would say also like an element of his higher self, you know, presenting, because
Yeah.
he was very like I said, protective, and there was a kindness to him, and he didn't seem like he was super traumatized. But he introduced me to all of this. It was like that's where the memory started. And in the few weeks coming after that was when all of this unfolded, and it was rather shocking. And in that time, he came to me as the man I'm speaking of, and the adult self, but also his super soldier aspect in the full-on uber black suit that we wore on Mars, and as a child self as well, and also as like a wounded animal screaming in pain, like his most hurt self, his most damaged aspect was also coming to me. And, you know, just to give people an idea of like how, like number one, like I said, how buried that was, and also how it came back was really unusual. And I feel like that's you know, worth sharing. Yeah.
Wow. Did you guys connect in the here and now?
No, and
No?
I have to admit that, you know, there's been telepathic connection between us, but I think in recent times I've just been like, man, I can't deal with this stuff. I don't want to, like, I've blocked it out a little bit, you know, to be really honest.
So
Yeah.
so you don't know who he is, like his name and stuff?
I know his name is Dean. His altar was his super soldier altar was called Neil. At least that's how I know him.
Okay.
Yeah, and there's a long saga with that I probably won't finish telling in this episode. We'll go into it in
So
the next episode, because it happens in a way that's you know, there's some darkness inside of that. There's also a lot of love. I mean, he was somebody we were wed in a way at 9 years old, and we were made to, like, let's say, love each other. So that's still, I would say, that's still there. All that's still there, but it's also bound up in all this trauma, right? So it's kind of wild to contemplate all of that, isn't it? And if you don't mind, I was going to read after this all came through, you know, and by the way, I had known like next to nothing about twinning when all of this
Wow.
came through for me. I was like, what in the fuck is this? Excuse my language. I didn't know anything about all of this. And so I started digging around once I got I don't do any research about anything until I get a large sum of information on my own first. But I found this I started getting like some information on the like, this is from Svali, who was born into an Illuminati family.
Uh-huh.
You're familiar, she was
Yeah,
trained as a
sure.
so
Yeah.
and she talks a lot about it. She says the twins do everything together, they are taught together, do military training together, they tell each other their secrets, but at some point they will be forced to hurt each other. If one twin is considered expendable, the ultimate setup will be one in which one twin is forced to die while the other watches. This does bear out in my experience. Many setups will involve one twin being forced to betray the other, turning on the other child after intense programming. This betrayal setup will devastate both children, and they will learn the true lesson: trust no one, betray, or be betrayed. I mean, this is so sick. Yeah, and if they refuse the command to harm the other twin will be brutalized by a programmer in front of them, and so on it goes. Yeah, and from, again, you probably know Fritz Springmeier and Cisco Wheeler, their book, Deeper Insights into the Illuminati Formula. I found this on the internet as well, this excerpt. Yeah, during the twinning, each victim will create parts that internalize all the characteristics of the person selected to be their twin. These parts have totally internalized the other person's identity. They are programmed to take responsibility for what the twin does, contrary to the programming. So you see how insidious this is and what they're doing to us as little kids. The paired slaves will be trauma bonded to each other. The older will want to protect and nurture the younger, and will be set up in situations to save the other from death. What were we doing on Mars? Why did he come to me and say, you saved my life? Yeah, they will torture each other. At times, they are forced to almost kill each other. They learn to live and die together. Exactly. They will internalize each other's pain when they are tortured in the vicinity of one another, etc. There's a good thing though in this coming up. Bear with me. Yeah, they will be given identical structures so that they can have the hidden keys to each other's systems. The deeper
Hmm.
parts of most systems can't be unlocked without the help of twins. So we're illuminating why did our programmers on Mars think this was so valuable? Yeah, they are given jobs and team projects that require the skills of both, especially jobs that require total compliance with the twinning programs in order to survive. They're programmed to be one in body, soul, and mind. They are set up in love-hate relationships. They are set up in opposites attract and opposites repel conflicts. They are sexually mated. They are telepathically connected. And yet, the two twins will also unlock each other's deeper systems. They will help trigger and help heal each other.
Wow.
That's if they survive all of this and find each other again. That's a possibility, which is potentially a silver lining. If anybody's had memories come back about twinning and can't really function because the memories are so bad, just remember that there could be even a multidimensional way in which healing could conceivably happen. So I wanted to illustrate that because this wasn't invented on Mars or at that naval base, right?
Right.
This goes back into Nazi Germany, I think into Babylon, and of course, the Illuminati families, as we've illustrated. So, whoa, everybody. So thanks for listening and hanging out with that. I just wanted to give it a little deeper mooring in, the bigger picture, I suppose. Yeah.
Okay. Johann Fritz, as you know him well, I know you've been together on a conference.
Mhm.
He talks about they take it as far as saying that they twin you because they find that you are kind of spiritually, what he calls it, the divine counterpart, that you are actually divinely paired, I guess, and that's why they mate you, and so they kind of find these two people who are supposedly, I guess, on the
Yeah.
spiritual level, they somehow do you feel that with Dean, or?
Yeah, I feel like that's it. That is, I don't think that's incorrect. In some cases, I think that's true.
Yeah.
Does it have to be like two people like that for them to pull this off successfully? No, I don't think so.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think everybody that's twinned is
Right.
like treated to be divine counterparts. In fact, I feel like, I see two sides of that coin. Yeah.
Yeah,
But
it actually may be the other way around. Like you weren't divine counterparts before. I mean, on some level, like
yeah.
you were supposed to meet, right? But yeah, it's
Mhm.
interesting
Yeah.
because it goes on two levels, like the soul level, the soul contract, and also
Yeah.
what they did on Earth, which is, sort of like a free reign kind of thing.
Yeah. So thanks everybody for listening to that. I don't think it's easy. But that's the preamble to us actually being sent to, after all that, we ended up on Mars in a base that was just south of the equator. Don't have a name for it. I don't, have any, there was no neon sign that said like, this is such and so, I'm not sure, but
Do you remember the trip and who took you there?
I don't exactly remember that. I just have memories of what's in my memory about the trip is just kind of looking at Mars and zoning in on this place that is exactly that, just south of the equator, and like coming in over and over and over. It's like that memory replays, like kind of like the leaving of the house.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like, here we go, and it's all in slow motion. Yeah, and so again, age 9, and definitely allowed to and wanted, it was wanted that I would age on Mars. They don't want to keep you a kid. They want to build you out into a mature adult, and that happens over time. And there was a school of sorts that we began, and it was of course training in the psi ability, and I think training Dean and I to work together more adeptly after all of this, right? And I would recall being trained to telekinetically operate a kind of, I call it, in my shorthand with myself, I call it a killing machine because that's what it seemed to be. But I remember controls in this thing, like manual controls, but I was really training to operate it telekinetically, telepathically. It seemed alive and conscious, like you're interfacing with a field of consciousness. actually, not just like a hunk of metal, but in a way, a being, something that's alive, you know.
Is it a robot or some kind of a?
No, I mean, we could talk about, the craft of, piloting a craft is similar in
Hmm.
that the thing isn't, it's not, it's way more sentient than a robot. It's not AI.
No, I mean, is it like a machine that is like walking and doing things like a humanoid or?
Yeah, this was, it was, I remember like a land-based craft in a way that this seemed to be, I don't know if it was an extension of that.
Hmm.
Yeah. So yeah, I was first trained in that way to operate some kind of land-based machine that seemed like part of a combat function that it had.
What did it do?
It was kind of a hover. I mean, it had like weapons attached to it. I don't remember that well, but the main point that I do remember is basically the training and the teaching and learning more than
Hmm.
operating it in an actual battle situation. I think they want to just get us kind of used to, hey, this is what you're going to be doing.
Like a
Um,
simulator kind of thing.
Yes, and what I was going to say is there was a ton of simulated training, like battle training. Um, and we were augmented over time, right? So progressively, I mean, they invest so much time and energy and also money and funding into creating these super soldiers. They're very careful, and nothing is wasted. There is nothing, even though we could say a lot of it. Would be experimental, like they was trying new things. It's also very well manicured, and there's an element of precision inside of this. It's not like sloppy.
Hmm.
So within that and over time, there would be, like I said, a lot of the simulated battle training. Like they could, because we were becoming part technology, and I, in my language, I would say cyborg, part like a cybernetic organism, which is part biology and part technology. So they would kind of tweak us out a little bit in a way that was very almost like putting us in a computer and then spitting us out on a virtual battlefield, and where we were trying to fight, which is crazy. Like in a way, I remember like not even always knowing that we were in a simulation. Like we're not necessarily, they're not telling you, hey, this is just a simulation, you can kind of just slack, it doesn't matter, because we could actually be killed in a simulation, and we didn't know that either. So we were definitely not we were not having a like a need to know basis on a need to know basis about even what was happening to us. So nobody ever, no, there's no, like, in other words, there was no debriefing. Like there's no, hey, we're going to put you in this and you're going to learn this. You're just kind of following blind every day, day after day, is what it felt like to me in any case. um I can tell, like the simulated memories, the simulated battle memory stuff, that training, is really different in my memory. It has a really different quality and feel. So you can tell the difference between what's real and what was actual and what was, again, a simulation. Is it was They're hyper adrenalized. Like they would jack us up on some kind of amphetamine before they would stick us in
Hmm.
the simulation. And we were trained to really to have no mercy and to be fearless, but also to have absolutely no will of our own. You're just taking commands. You're taking commands that are coming in through like a mind-to-mind interface, which sounds really wild, but we're familiar with that technology now, right? Not new technology. And when all these memories were coming in, again, however many years ago now, I was brought back into a really kind of eerie and chilling memory of being in this. It's like the altar. I call it the kill command altar. And like I feel like I'm just an empty shell. Like there's no me there. There's nothing of me. I just feel like kind of a machine. And where commands are coming in, and there's all these blips in the mind. And it's almost like a binary sequencing that is interfacing with me and commanding in a way. And it's just, as a human and as a woman, it's very it's kind of upsetting in a way to feel to know that was done to me and to recall that. Anyway, definitely, could switch you on in that kind of an altar.
Hmm.
And so to activate that aspect of you, so it's not on all the time. They don't want the fight aspect of you on all the time. You'll be unable to do and to like function, right? But that there is that, and um the very unnatural state of the when they would drug us and just make us fight. Like it's
Can you describe a scenario? What would it look like? Is it a terrain, some kind of a like extraterrestrial
it's kind
planet?
of like a, yeah, it is like that. It's kind of like a video game in my
Oh,
recollection. There is like this a little bit of a, you know, if you're discerning, you can perceive a little bit of almost a 2D quality to it.
mhm.
I don't think that's what we're supposed to be, you know, like I said, we're not supposed to know about that. We're supposed to feel like it's all completely real. And just for for training purposes. I mean, it's kind of brilliant from a training purpose, but it was almost like the stuff inside of it didn't really feel like Mars. It was just like
Oh,
putting us into random scenarios that would be almost um I don't know what the algorithm of that was or where they generated this stuff from. Like it's just kind of taking us into some bizarre
so you were like running around on the ground. Who did you fight?
various like random like people, beings,
Hmm.
hybrid type of creatures. And it was trying also to induce fear, to get you to how are they going to respond to fear, and how do we need to augment their system so that they will be fearless in the face of any kind of danger.
Hmm.
Like, so you're basically turning off your human system that's going to, normally you're going to be afraid and not approach, or you're going to be afraid and run the other way. They don't want us running, they want us attacking, right? So all of that. And we could say that, again, my experience as a woman, like, why would they want to build out a woman? Why don't just keep men for the super soldier job? But they wanted, I'm making a huge generalization, but women tend to be naturally more psychic. It's just kind of
Hmm.
how it goes. Naturally more intuitive. And they want that. They want that aspect of one's humanity all the way. They
Okay.
don't want to augment that in any way. And that, why did they keep me with this team? I was usually working with a team of 7. That's, at least in my memory, we had a company of 7 that we were doing base protection, kind of some boring stuff. But they would keep me on as a female to kind of lead the psychic. They were all built out to be psychic, but it felt like for me, that was the kingpin of my ability. Like, maybe they wanted some big, strong guys, of course, and they can always, they'll take whatever's natural in you and work with that to highlight it, but they can build you out in a variety of ways and build out your most special capacity so it shines, right?
So the base was underground.
The base was, as to my recollection, largely underground. There's some stuff above ground too. I mean,
Hmm.
it feels really, in my memory, it's very washed out. And on Mars, I remember the sun feeling super hot, and it could have been the suit that I was wearing. I don't
Hmm.
know. And also, the sun being too bright. I just felt like the glare was like too much, and it was too hot all the time when I would be out. I don't know. I don't know why that is, because Mars is farther from the sun. Maybe it's an
Yeah,
atmospheric.
but people reported that the equator is quite hot, and it's pretty much like Earth, and sometimes even hotter because it's all, desert basically. Do,
Yeah,
do
absolutely.
you
Like,
remember the surroundings? Like, are there any plants, forests, animals, stuff like that?
yeah, not so much plants above ground, not anything substantial like that we would. I don't remember that in any
Hmm.
case. I was I'll talk about my underground experience with the reptilians later, but um, yeah, just kind of barren, kind of stark.
Barren terrain. Okay.
That's my most, yeah, that's what I remember the most. I mean,
Okay.
I didn't see every inch of Mars, so I can't comment on that. Maybe there's water underground when I was with the reptilians later, but
Hmm.
that I don't recall above ground water there. Um, yeah, trying to think of what else. If you remember, a lot of wind, like just like blowing sand,
Hmm.
the endless wind, very clearly. So
And who
yeah.
ran the program there?
And I was interfacing largely with dudes, like American dudes, like
Oh,
military, and I think some corporate interests there.
okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So um trying to think if there
So
was
how many people were on the base, all in
you
all?
don't really know, because I wouldn't have seen all of it.
Hmm.
I remember interacting mostly, with a more, smaller group. And then this 7 of us who formed a larger team. I remember also mantids we had some mantids who were working for us, mantids who were techs and surgeons and mechanics, because the mantids were super duper everything that's really detail oriented, fine tuned. They are, they're masters of detail work and very adept in so many ways. And at the upper dimensions, they are masters of frequency, sound, and vibration. So it kind of plays out. I mean, I have felt, and not everyone may agree with me, because they're large in a way, they're big bugs, but I don't think about them that way. That I find like such a tremendous elegance to the mantids that I interface with on Mars. Yeah, and I don't think of them as just big insects. Their upper dimensional qualities really shine through. So I recall one time I was augmented, so I had I remember some kind of very high-tech, I don't know whether to call it metal, off-world, it was some kind of off-world element of augmentations of that through my arm and my head particularly, and through almost down into my hand. And I remember waking up from some kind of surgical thing, and these two mantids are over me, and this light's over me, and the mantids are like looking at each other like, oh, did we screw up? Is she okay? Did we do the right thing? Like they looked at it was kind of this funny moment, like, oh, we're gonna be in deep shit. We screwed up. I don't know. I don't have a memory of what exactly they had done that time, but it was kind of, I don't know, it was a little bit funny. I mean, if anything's going to be funny, we'll take it, right? Yeah. Yeah, the mantids. And we'll get into the mantid labyrinth and things in the next segment. But they know a lot of the mantids that were working for us were mind controlled. And some of them may have volunteered, but they were kind of there in a way in which they weren't entirely all there, I would also say, as you would expect from someone who was mind controlled. So we took the way we were altering humans with these programs and applied it to other races. Yeah. And like I said, oh, go ahead.
No, I'm just so 9 years old, you're on the base, you start this training school. Do you remember any like regular type classes where you like sit and do some stuff, or is it all
I don't
in the field?
remember that, although it wouldn't, like the really mundane stuff, like, like really neutral stuff is not, I remember the biggest highs and the biggest lows, but like really neutral stuff, like, I don't know, who cares? Like, like when I look back on my human life now, do I remember like, boring stuff? Not so much.
Yeah.
There might have been, it'd be interesting to know, were there like normal classes? That's not what I recall though.
So you said that you were patrolling around the base to protect the base. Who were you protecting against?
The locals. But what's interesting here, I think there's a lot of how would I say, inversion in how that was presented to us. Yes, we're protecting the colonies, right? But also we were the aggressors in some situations too. So not to say we were always just like passively waiting to be attacked by somebody, or if some outside interest wants to come in and do whatever at the base, and we need to be on that, right? So there is that element, not just locals, but anybody who might be wanting to get into a turf war with us, or some other group wherever. They did need protection, I suppose, in that way. Yeah. So the progression was being eventually, after all the telekinetic, learn how to operate this thing with your mind, it was eventually trained to pilot, which are honestly some of my happiest memories. Like piloting is exquisite. Exquisite, like absolutely awesome memories of that. Yeah, there's something special about that. And then we were trained on land to be very, very to be combatants on land as needed. So, and that was a progression over many, many years. Like Mars was this place that I felt like I would never leave. Like, it's just like, I'm here forever in this like repeating day after day of the same thing. I don't know. Eventually I did leave Mars, but yeah. And I guess I mentioned the suits that we wore were black, kind of form-fitting super high tech in ways, again, that like my mind, my 3D mind is like, I can't even really fathom this. And I think over time they had different iterations of those suits where they were trying different technologies. And I know like when I know exactly what my suit looks like, because when Dean comes to me, he's got that, you know, his
Oh,
super soldier part has the
okay.
same suit. We were like twins. We were absolutely like twins. We're in the same thing. Um, yeah, and it had, I mean, there was quite a, you know, array of defensive sort of technologies connected to the suit. And I think in some, again, in some iteration, that suit itself was conscious in a way, just like I talk about
Yeah.
the craft being conscious. It's all, everything's consciousness. My computer, my microphone, the floor, like it's all really made of consciousness and energy, right? That's my impression. Yeah. And also I would say too, sometimes I think we talked about clones in the past. It always seems like within the engineering of a super soldier, it's built in that there's going to be a lot of clones. I think that's just
Hmm.
part of how the whole thing goes. And eventually after they build you out, they can sell you, they can trade you. That's how I ended up later with the Draco. You know, it was a trading deal, unless, I mean, it's possible the Draco stole me. I don't know, but
You mean they
the,
sold your clone, not this version that was on Mars. So it was like a parallel kind of
I
experience.
don't know. I don't know that it was entirely, it was not overlapping for the whole experience of all of
Hmm.
that, but there may have been. I feel like there was some overlap, and it's not, to be clear too, it's not being sold for like money in American dollars. It's for, you know, all the other currency of exchange out there, right?
Hmm.
So favors, technology, of course, DNA, and so on and so forth. So, yeah, there's a lot to that. I do remember, maybe I talked about this before, the spider that I was killed by on Mars. Did I talk about that?
Yeah, yeah. In one of those older ones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that, you know, I think I might have mentioned that then the technology that we had, like there were 7 of us who were out on patrol, and the spiders coming down over this hill, and they all had, you know, in my memory, it feels like they just vaporized. You know, they're gone, they disappeared. But it's a cloaking technology, and
Oh.
either my tech wasn't functioning or pilot error, meaning me, I wasn't functioning properly to get it, you know,
Hmm.
get cloaked fast enough, and the thing, it killed me. So I remember, I think I've said this, you know, my consciousness being face down in the sand, is blowing sand, and I'm face down and going like, I'm aware that I'm dying, but I'm also awake and I don't quite know where to go yet. It was sort of this moment of existential confusion, I
How
would
big
say.
was the spider?
Fucking huge. It was huge. Like, to my memory, again, to my memory, it was enormous. It could just
Like
be
bigger
because
than you or?
I was, oh yeah, way bigger than me. I mean, it
Oh, okay.
felt like in my memory, how I wrote it in my journal, it was like the thing is as big as a house.
Oh
I'm
my
sure that's
God.
not true, but because I'm like, I'm frightened. I am, you know, I'm afraid, at least as it's, you know, coming through memory. I'm like, oh Jesus, the thing is like
Was it more
big
like?
and smelly and brown and hairy and
Oh,
like,
okay.
it was stinky. It was stinky. I'm
What?
sure, you know, it's just a spider, a big spider. So what? But if it feels frightening, right? When it's that big.
So it's more like an animal, not a conscious being, you think?
Um, I wouldn't I wouldn't assume that, you know. I mean, I didn't interface with it telepathically, not, at least not that I remember. But it has some higher tech, you know, the thing that it directed some kind of energy weapon at me.
Oh,
That's not low tech. So I wouldn't say it's just like a base animal that has no consciousness at all.
oh.
But I wasn't around long enough to have a conversation with it. I don't know. I don't
So
know.
he wasn't like biting you with,
No.
venom and stuff,
No,
no?
no, it was a directed weapon.
I
Some
see.
kind of frequency. It was a frequency that
Oh,
came that come out of it. Yeah, and it was
like
fast. It
some
was
kind of
fast.
some kind of a beam, particle beam.
It felt like it was just energy. I don't know. Other than that,
Wow. And so
and it was.
he basically hit you, and so the way I imagined it is that the way that people describe it is that it has these mandibles, and they just come fast at you, and they just bite you with venom, like what Penny described in one of her
Mhm.
incidents there. So this one was like a distance kill, basically. Yes.
Yeah, that's what I recall
Oh,
of it.
okay.
Yes, and it was. I mean, it was quick. It wasn't like I was laying there suffering for a long time. but it was frying. I feel like I didn't really even have any flesh wounds, but it was inside. Something inside my technology was fried, as
Right.
well as my biology. Like
Okay.
both two components were like faded out quickly.
Like an
So
EMF,
like an EMF.
like a, what do you call it? EMP. Yeah.
Oh, um, what else?
Do you remember
Yeah.
waking up after this? Like, did you wake up somewhere in the medical bay somewhere?
I don't have super clear memory of that. I think,
Okay.
sort of like it just, my memory kind of goes out after that. And I don't know where it picks up again properly in a linear
Mm.
way. So I can't really say with that. So another thing that's coming to me, jumping around a little bit, was this. I don't think I spoke of this like this. Our commanders had set us up to be infiltrated by like super soldiers from another company that were also from the future. I mean, this is getting pretty weird. And they were Japanese, but they
Mm.
stuck them in our group to see how long it would take for us to figure out that they weren't part of us or they weren't like us. They
Mm.
were much more, they were way less human and more technology than we were. And it was like it was weird. It was like being pulled back and forth in this, what I can identify now, call it a timeline war, being pulled to and fro, and to see commanders were, someone else has said, that the Mars colonies were run by psychopaths. And what I experienced out there was absolutely, that's correct, at least in the era that I was on Mars. Perhaps that was not always the case, but in this case, yes. So they implanted them intentionally to see what would happen and who would win, and how soon would we notice that they weren't natural to what our company was, or
Mm.
what our team was made out of. And being, pulled back and forth in a timeline war, which was actually pretty scary and dangerous. We're working with time, but
So
ultimately, I mean,
what was happening exactly? What do you mean?
yeah. So I remember being pulled out and viewing this. This at first glance, it's this really beautiful Japanese type of, almost like a hanging. I want to say like a hanging world or hanging city, and
Mm.
it's all these white, beautiful, almost white rounded structures of the city, and there's living life there. There's like, I see plants and things like that, and looking at it kind of from a distance, from an edge, um, almost like a gateway or a portal into this realm.
Hmm.
But it's all dead. It's all sterile in a way. It's all, the energetic has been, unique energetic signatures have been wiped out, and it's just, again, energetically it's been sterilized. Even though I'm looking at plants and some life and really beautiful, some kind of futuristic architecture. It's lovely. Again, Japanese. Think about a little Japanese futurism here in your vision, as you're imagining a lot of white, and the super soldiers who would come in were also wearing this kind of white, same kind of material. I don't know exactly what that was, but looking in on this sort of, we could say from a certain mindset or a certain perspective, you could say, oh, we're looking at a perfect world. There's nothing alive anymore. Everything is controlled. It's all been
Mm.
sterilized, and humanity has become sterilized.
Okay.
And in fact, in the end, we were able to win that war because those super soldiers could not think for themselves. They couldn't. They were completely programmed, like we were programmed to, but we still had the ability to function, to use our, executive mind to some degree, in situations where we needed it, right?
Did you guys go in to the city, or did they
I
go
don't
out of the?
remember that. I remember being on the fringe and almost just like
Mm.
we're looking at it at the edge, like I described,
Mm.
but not going deeply in, because the deeper you go into that, it's almost like you're under a spell. And you're like, oh,
Okay.
isn't this beautiful? Isn't this lovely? I want to stay here.
It's like in the book A Wrinkle in Time, where they describe this perfect world
Oh,
that is like ran by sort of like an AI mind that,
oh, now that I mention it, Alexander, now
everyone's
that
like
I mention that,
behaving perfectly, but then you realize that it's all like AI ran and everyone isn't like an automaton,
no,
basically.
you just linked something up for me, because that book was one of my favorite books when I was like in my early teens back in
Yeah.
the day. And like, now that you mention, I'm like, wow, was I replaying something from there? Because I would read that book and like start it over at the beginning and read it again. Like I was trying to get something out of it. Like, I don't know.
Right.
Um, So, and the one more thing I guess we could talk about, or go back to the memories of piloting. You know, I have really good memories of being in a solo craft, like just being out on patrol, and certainly tethered to base through this technology, you know, through the mind, like a kind of implanted technology. But I feel like that really relates to why I've always enjoyed and longed for landscapes like Alaska, or out on, you know, the Greenland ice sheet, or in some deep desert that most people wouldn't enjoy. I really like those landscapes. I think it's really directly related to Mars. Um, as well, I would say, I recently, in the past month, since I've been in, you know, since I made my life in Alaska, I've started shooting. You know, I become a competitive shooter up here, and when I started shooting, and still, it's like I don't know where this complete gift comes from, because I'll say I'm a very good shooter without any training, and that I think is also pointing back to the programs. You know, it's
Wow.
wild, absolutely wild. It's been, I would say, also deeply redemptive to you know, so many times and places where, you know, I was the weaponized being controlled, and I have no desire to harm anybody, but being in command of a weapon now, and especially as a woman, you know, all kinds of bad things happen to me that I had no power over, and it's very um it's weird to say that shooting could be healing, but that's what I found. That's my
Centering,
experience.
yes.
And so it's,
Very centering.
I think so. And not everyone's going to agree with that. And some people might say you're a light worker, you have no reason to be picking up a gun. But you know, I'm on my path here, and it makes total sense given what I'm talking about here in the programs, right? So, and I could say one last thing about more recent memories that came up just this year earlier on. The one of the craft that I piloted on Mars, you know, I have this recollection. Frankly, I'll say it. This craft looks like a souped up version of an old military craft from the 1940s or so, that's been retrofitted for Mars, a helicopter, right?
Mm.
From like the World Wars or something, which is weird. But in the memory that I had more recently, um, I recall the power system, power generator in that thing, like after the cockpit, like more toward the center of the craft, is this, it's like a moving centrifuge. It's almost like looking through this portal of infinite space or light. But I don't know if it's a torsion field or what, but it's moving, and the movement part is the generation. It's using quantum energy to generate power. And it's like I'm looking into the whole universe. I mean, it's a beautiful memory. It's like, I'm so excited to it sounds so simple in a way, but to me it was really profound to recall that, because it's beautiful in an indescribable way, palpable to my whole system. Like, we're talking about a benevolent higher technology. It's not about war and weapons. I mean, we're talking about technology that's very applicable to our situation here on Earth. And I hope that
So was it a battlecraft that you flew, or you just
I wouldn't call it a big battle cry. I mean, it was kind of pathetic. That thing was like, I call it in my notes, I call it the Mars Junker. It's like, yeah, it seems like it was kind of on its last legs. But like I said, had been retrofitted, so there was higher technology capacity within
okay?
it.
So
Even though the
yeah.
shell was kind of like, what is this? This thing is a piece of crap. But nevertheless, there's this gateway into beauty in the center of that craft. So
Oh,
it was more for patrol. Like, I could call if something was coming in. You know, I had some rudimentary ways, absolutely, of using it as
okay.
weaponry, right? So fighting back, shooting, whatever.
Do you remember who would encroach on the base like usually? Do you remember any beings, any kind of skirmishes?
Definitely. Oh, it was like a mutiny by the mantas we had working for us.
Oh,
So there's one night, we had, this is hard for me to talk about because I can feel it coming up through my body. We were, the base was decimated, and it was the mantas that were helped by another group. They were coming in from the air with our own craft and bombing us. It was like an air raid, you know.
mm.
And I remember having my left leg blown off, and a guy is shouting, everybody's running in this like total chaos. We didn't expect this to happen, of course, right? Somebody's running in the other direction saying, get up, run, we're gonna die. And he's, you know, rushing, everybody's rushing this other way, and I can't move because my leg is gone. And, you know, another time where my memory after that goes black, and I assume they either took me to, you know, medical eventually after all this stopped, or that I just died and was replaced by a clone. But it was intense. It wouldn't be what we had anticipated, because it was, like I said, a kind of mutiny and a kind of skirmish from within our own ranks. Yeah.
So that was the highlight of the base life, right?
Oh my
One of the
God.
highlights.
Yeah. Like so I had really bad PTSD for a while with
Oh,
fireworks.
wow.
And so I'll tell you a little story. A few years back, I was living in India, and it's going on right now, the festival of Diwali, the festival of
Right.
light vanquishing darkness, right? Are you familiar? And they do fireworks for like 3 or 4 days straight. And there's like big booms going off. And I was like, one night I'm like lying on my bedroom floor, and all this stuff is going on. I put earplugs in, and I'm shaking and I'm shaking and I'm shaking. And all these memories start coming back in of
Wow.
that night on Mars. So ultimately, that was explained to me via the, you know, why am I so upset by fireworks for my whole life? It's like, it is like a veteran with PTSD, absolutely a war veteran. And it's hard to recover from that. And we who have served in space don't get to come back and claim any benefits from the US government for sure. But I'm glad that since all the memory came back, my nervous system feels better, and I can be around fireworks without freaking out. And feeling like I need to run and take cover and like fight for my life. Yeah, pretty wild. But that was a very, like there's all of this, like citron yellow and green light in the sky, like flares. And from that night, yeah, I do remember that very clearly. And like I said, Alex, like we remember like the biggest beauty and the most devastation. Like those are the memories that's like come back, I think would say the easiest that we recall.
So in the next episode, we're going to talk about...
Yeah, well, so we'll go deep into the mantids and what Dean and I were doing with the mantids. How are we mind controlling them? What was our offense with the mantids? What were we viewing with the mantids? And what happened? What was the end of Dean and I? What happened there? You know, that's a pretty full story. And then we'll have another episode after that in which we go into my experience with reptilians and another little... how do we call it, a crime syndicate on Mars at the time that was run by the Draco. That's going to be pretty interesting. A little bit of soul scalping operation out there on Mars, which I got caught in the middle of. So, yeah, we got some juicy content coming up.
All right,
Thank you,
cool.
you guys. Thanks everybody for being here. Yeah.